Hello guys, welcome back to the second instalment of What If. And in this instalment, we're looking at a series that I've been involved with, like in the fandom, for about a couple of years now, really. And it's ever growing, nice little decent following still, fantastically, and a Facebook page to go through it. It is Cosgrove Hall's The Wind and the Willows. And this is actually Series 6, or Ringmaster Toad Series 2, and Broadcasting Night 1. And this would have been the last ever Wind and the Willows series. But it has a twist. This is a prequel to the first series, to Series 5. So Series 6 is a prequel to Series 5, because this is set in between A Tale of Two Toads and The Chief's Return. And how it is, well, the opening bit really is like, Toad finds an old diary and he starts reading it. He recalls events that happened sort of before, I think just before The Chief's Return. This is basically Toad, revisiting stuff maybe he written a year ago in his diary, because he tends to write his diary like May 14th or something, or September the 9th or whatever. But also, one major thing that might be a return off for many people who found the series is that the weasels are not in this, unfortunately. They're replaced by the Stouts, or Stoats, or Stoats, I think. Yeah, why was I saying Stouts? It's pretty strange. Stoats. Instead of the weasels, we've got the Stoats in this one. So it's like a substitute weasel, only for this series only. And we get introduced to a new character called Fox. Fox was actually like an old acquaintance of Toad's late father, and Badger as well. And he returns to Riverbank and tries to convince Toad to live the city life in London and leave everyone on the Riverbank, and tries to sort of slyly persuade him to leave Toad Hall for good. Because obviously for his aristocratic nature, like his whole crazes and everything else, his whole witness, everything else, like in the previous series, like he references stuff that Toad has done. Of course, like the size of a hot air balloon, the idea of archaeology and stuff like that, doing his own museum in Old Toad, all this sort of stuff like he's been doing, of course, these crazes and whatnot. He thinks, could you just done this in the city or something like that? It could bring more attention, whatever, more the lines, something like that. And he tries to swing it, like try and get poise her arm around Toad and whatnot, trying to show him you have a bare life in London, plenty of possibilities. They could be rich and famous. You could be a somebody in a way, be well loved and everything else, rather than be in this countryside place in the middle of nowhere in a countryside in a riverbank. You could have lived the high life, rather than be just stranded in greenery or anything like that. We never know. We're never too sure what his intentions are, really, just to get rid of Toad, really. That's the main thing, like bring him to the city. So let's go for the stories now. So a little backstory of these stories, actually, in a way. So the actual story arc I saw come later, but the stories themselves come a bit earlier, actually, a couple of years ago, about 2019, really. Richard Haynes, fellow animator, of Cosgrove Hall, was doing these commentaries and stuff on every single Wind and Willows episode, of course, including the two specials, really, the movie and Tale of Two Toads as well. And obviously, when we came to Series 5, the special episodes, which I think like at the end of each month, I think they would have been the end of each month, when he was all doing it. I mentioned some episodes are sort of like for a bit, a bit not the best, a bit bland or anything else. What Truman was writing. And I thought I could probably try and do some stories that had never been attempted before, really. And I was saying some interesting ideas for him. And of course, he liked them, actually. He liked what was presented. One of them, he thought was like an absolute brilliant idea that was, sort of maybe would have been ideal, especially if they actually managed to make it back in the day, really. But here we go. So this would have been what was included. So 13 episodes, which is the obvious thing, really, of course. And this would have been the last set of stories that would have been featured in The Wind and the Willows, really. I don't think they'll continue with any more stuff since then Thames sort of ceased to exist afterwards. So this would have been prior to the Thames closed down everything else. So there we go. So 91 instead of like 92 and 93 really, you know, or 92 really, the one in the last one actually. So episode 1 is called Flight of the Crimsons. Basically, it's to do with Toad and aeroplanes, really. So obviously, it's obviously used in the end of the films, really. Like if you look at any adaptations, you see Toad fly around in planes, really, and you know that's all like him just enjoying having fun, going nuts, of course, and ends up crashing at the end, really. You know, and or sometimes you know he's left unscathed. Depends. I think he may crash at the end in some films, really, if I'm mistaken. So this one would be it's called back to the original film. It is. It's called, you know, and obviously he's returned back to flying planes. It's also borrows elements from the Willows in Winter, the William Howard book, in which Toad brings Ratty on to fly, and obviously he has to be like a co-pilot or whatever. And obviously he goes crazy, of course, and that obviously ends up putting Ratty in danger. So that would have been that story bit was included in this one, of course, like. It would have been said maybe in the spring or summer or whatever. And Toad says, you know, oh Ratty, come on board and everything else, and sort of tries to convince Ratty, you know, like see the world, see like the bit of travel, of course. And he sort of suggests that, really, you know, like seeing stuff from like the Riverbank from the sky, of course. And he sort of just brings Ratty on board, you know, and ends up driving like nuts, of course. And Ratty's holding for dear life or whatever, and nearly falls out of the plane. Really, I think he falls out, but he has a parachute with him. He sort of manages to get to safety, obviously. And Badger's completely annoyed, of course. And it feels, you know, foolish creature shaking a stick out of his fist in the air. That sort of thing. Like in Willows in Winter, you know, heavily borrows from this story. But not less in Winter, you got the original voice cast as well, and stop motion, everything else. So it seems like a very interesting idea, although it just sort of borrows from it, really, in a way. Episode 2 is An Officer and a Toad. Toad decides to become a police officer because the Riverbank has been faced with vandalism and sort of crimes, thieves and whatnot by the Stoats, really, in a way. So we're introduced to the Stoats in this story, we are, you know. This first one's just focused on Toad, really, and some of the inhabitants where he's flying and whatever. But this one really introduces the Stoats, in a way. And they're sort of like more rambunctious in a way, you know, like the little hoodlums, like young hoodlums in a way. And they basically just go around and basically just vandalise, steal stuff, basically pest the youngsters as well. They're very sort of mean against that sort of thing, like young men, like, you know, trying to, you know, ruin everything for fun, you know. And Toad decides to become like forced by this and becomes a police officer and dons his costume from, I think it's from the Pirates of Byzance, from Producer's Lot, and he dons that, of course, and gets a plastic truncheon out, an old wooden truncheon, and goes around to seek out the Stoats. Ends up successfully going wrong, of course, and Badger Ratty will sort of step in to help him out. Anyway, that's sort of typical thing, really, you know. And also, I think in some occurrences he thinks like the youngsters are stealing stuff as well, and they end up trying to arrest them, of course, like that. And again, getting mixed up and getting people wrong, of course. They actually, you know, they probably think they're feeling stuff, but they're not. You know, it's like Toad's just blind determination to stop people, of course, from doing crimes. It could be like people like being over-determinated, you know, in Toad's case, really. But it would have been interesting, actually, in a way. So there we go. Now, episode 3 is Mr. Toad's Orchestra. Now, this was the story I did that Richard Haynes actually thinks was a perfect idea, actually. In this case, Toad decides to become a conductor, like a composer in a way, and decides to write his own sheet music. Very much becomes, you know, like, and transform his own symphony. Writes a symphony half-heartedly in a very way full of squiggles and whatnot, and notes that shouldn't be good where they should go. Like it's like a scribbled black mess, really. And obviously, you got people, you know, you got the youngsters and Ratty and Badger to actually again help perform, get the instruments and look at the sheet music and think, oh God, do it goes like that, goes like that. It's like, and they're very and they're baffled and confused, and Toads doesn't have a clue. He's holding a stick, but he's going waving like mad, like he sticks his hand all over the place, like it's like trying to bat a fly or something. In a way, it's like that actually does happen. Like a bee-soul goes around and sort of he tries to swat it and goes like mad. It's that comic thing, of course, and the monks just go bloody mad and just go over the place. Like one section goes. It's like that, really. It's like very comically done in a way. And obviously Toad gives up, really. Like he's like, you know, And thought like, I thought that was pretty good. And Toad's like, and just Ty's like, wow, enough, and throws a little stick across the room, whatever, Obviously, if that sort of ambition for being a composer, or conductor, sort of gives up really. Episode 4 is Broken Racket. Now, this is basically an episode involving Toad doing tennis, really, and so this would have been it's hinted at in another story, I think later on in series 2, I think. I'm trying to think when, but obviously there was mention of a tennis episode. I think that was sort of planned or floating around, but never used actually. I don't know, or never been suggested. But finally, we have an episode involving Toad doing tennis, of course, and he's up against the Stoats, of course, in this one, just to challenge him really to win. Of course, if they don't, they'll probably nick his car or something, take his car, the prize, whatever. And obviously, doesn't succeed, but also his friends stick out for him, really. Anyway, so that's really what Broken Racket is. Episode 5 is Artist Toad, and obviously an episode with Toad doing painting, which sort of been hinted at as well, suggested as well, but never actually done before. So Artist Toad, Badger teaches Toad how to paint, and also uses patience, whatnot, and basically just and tries to and is interested in teaching Toad, of course. It's like the complete bungler, when Badger's enthusiastic, like, oh good, Toad's might be interested in angler, I can teach him, and obviously sort of gives up with how Toad is very impatient all the time. Same thing goes to here with Artist Toad, like Badger thinks about like in the woods and stuff, like nearby where he lives and whatever, in the wildwood, and decides to maybe paint some flowers or something like that, and look at, ease it down and everything else, and Toad's just like rambash or whatever, like that, and he's like, oh, I give up, really, that sort of thing. That's what Artist Toad's really about, really. It's basically focusing more about Badger and Toad, really, in this one. Episode 6 is Pirates of the Riverbank. Basically, Toad wants to become a pirate because he's been reading Treasure Island, and decides to make his own little craft, or take a boat, whatever, like an old rowing boat or something like that, or Ratty's boat or whatever, and decides to go beyond the riverbank in search of treasure. And in doing so, ends up getting stranded on the island. Of course, when the boat actually sinks, ends up being stranded. With some of the youngsters, like they sort of brings on board, like Billy Rabbit and whatever, brings them on board, these crew members, really. And again, this book takes some elements from like Toad being influenced by literature, like in The Labyrinth, he's influenced by Sherlock Holmes. In A Toad in Time, he's influenced by H.G. Wells, really. There we go. So it's another thing that Toad's influenced by whatnot he reads in the books and think, I could do that. I can try and invent something like that. I could be this sort of person. This sort of person can do this sort of thing. Why can't I? Episode 7 is 4th of July. Toad decides to host an Independence Day party, so it's a bit like May Day, and what's the other episodes I can do that has done the same? I really don't know actually, but it's all again, it's like focus on like some of the happens in the States. That's so well known parody, like with the whole Uncle Sam imagery and whatnot, and these the American flags and whatnot, going around Toad Hall, and Toad trying to do American accent or something like that, and also setting off fireworks. That doesn't really go well, unfortunately. Episode 8 is Heatwave. Just basically Toad trying to survive a heatwave. Like, it's a hot day in the riverbank, of course, and Toad's just like trying to find shade, water, and everything else, and trying to cool down, really. That's basically what the attempt is, really, in that story. It's just basically very Toad-centric, of course, and, it's like him trying to survive that horrible heat, very much. Like, it's a lovely day, but the heat is bloody unbearable, that sort of thing. Episode 9 is Ringmaster Toad, and Toad decides to become a ringmaster, of course, do his own circus. Builds up gets a big tent up in Toad Hall and decides to bring people along, the youngsters, of course, to their own tricks like juggling, whatever, and, perform that sort of thing. Of course, maybe do some dangerous stunts like trapeze stuff, and, try and do some daily stuff like jump up wings of fire and whatever, and decides to indulge it, really, and bring it on board. And, yeah. Really, that would have been interesting, actually. Very circus themed as well. Again, like just basically focus on Toad's own circus, really. Like that sort of thing. Like you're watching like a performance for about 20 minutes or something, and it would be interesting. Episode 10 is The Last Minute Fete. Toad decides to host a charity fete, and that ends up going wrong, of course. Not one of more fleshed out stories. Unlike all the rest, really. I think it was like it was meant to be for a different project, actually, that one, for a different writing project, but I ended up using it, of course, for much stories to really go on from, really. So charity fete, earn a bit of money, of course, and ends up, maybe selling stuff and also bits and pieces, of course. Ends up going wrong. Stoats are involved again, of course. Obviously, Fox is looming over. I mentioned before. I never mentioned throughout the stories, but he's a constant presence throughout the series. He is, really. Episode 11 is Toad Entrepreneur. Toad decides to make his own candles, really. After learning about his family history, what his family had been doing prior to being getting rich and being successfully well, which obviously it was mentioned in Winter Haunts, this was, and obviously Toad takes on that history and decides to make his own candles and sell them, with horrible results and very contorted, weird, look strange candles, really. Like, the candles are different from each other in terms of size and scale in places. Also, like in different shapes. It's like, why is that one like, it's like twisty and like that, like circly, one's drooping down, whereas the flame's meant to go up the top, not the bottom. Everything else, it's just like one of those things, I think it'd be like a lamp thing, really, in a way, like in Toad's interest in persuasion, like it could be ideal along the wax and burn the floor, cause some flames or whatever. Who knows? But it's sort of a little interesting one, really, on that one. The penultimate story is The Last Temptation of Toad, in which Toad becomes a faith healer, which actually borrows elements from a Simpsons episode from series 11. I think it's called Fete 4. It's when Bart becomes a faith healer. Of course, he thinks he has the powers to heal people. Toad thinks he has as well, because I think he helps one of the youngsters, of course, and like out of a ditch or something, like he's got a cut, and he sort of rubs it, and sort of thinks like, he always thinks he's healed someone, and he does this sort of thing, like he becomes like, dressed up in white and whatnot, and becomes, like, and arranges people like, "Are you injured, my boy?" and that sort of thing, and also pats them very much, like pats them gently, and does some weird talking or whatever. He thinks he can probably heal people, but probably can't. He probably thinks, he brushed it over someone's fur and his little kid's still bleeding, whatever. You don't know, but we don't even know. But he basically thinks he's a healer. He comes to horrible desire, of course, like, actually, no, he hasn't really healed anyone, really, and that's put like a damp on his expectations, really. And finally, the last story of this series, of the Winter Bells, Series 6, Mr. Toad, Series 2, is The Bells. The Bells. This is basically Toad trying to host a wedding ceremony. Obviously, a couple, like, want to get married, young couple want to get married, and Toad decides to become the person involved in, it's like pronouncing, they'll be man and wife, whatever, that sort of thing, in his way. Also brings the revelation that, Badger finds out what is Fox doing here in Total. He wants to take up Toad Hall, really. Wants to basically get rid of it, really, and demolish it. He wanted Toad Hall, and he wanted to buy it off Toad's late father, but he refused. And this led to some weird squabbling stuff, indeed, between the three of them, between Fox, Badger, and Toad's late father. Fox leaves, never to be seen again until now. This architecture done by, that's been there for a long time, many years, centuries, that sort of thing. It's like, well, yeah, but I was involved in other bits, of course, when I renew it when his father was still around, of course. That's what, and he sort of steps in and you think, well, I actually invested some cash in this as well, indeed, so I deserve to earn it myself. He's no longer here. Toad's father's son, of course, is like, he's left to the rot, of course, and it's like, I'm here to really bring it up to a new age, really. In terms, he wants to just demolish it, turn it into a factory or something, because it's a bit of an eyesore in the Riverbank. Then afterwards, Fox leaves, and we never see the Stoats again, really. And obviously, that's what happens, really, in that series. So, there we go, guys. That's what my Series 6 of Wind and Willows would have been like, actually. I don't know if people might agree with that. Might anger quite a lot of people. There'll be comments raving like mad. They think, no, should be like that. No. I think, like, maybe they just did, but I think it probably won't work. But who knows? That's my interpretation of it. So there we go. Thank you for watching, guys. As always, we'll see you for the next installment of What If. Anyway, we'll see you later.